Hello everybody, it's me, Riffraff Hornhelm, and I'm back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault. And today, we have a fail tale. And today's fail tale is about, well, death in the game of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm talking specifically about the earliest days of the game. So we're talking up through first edition advanced Dungeons and Dragons rules. So in the title I say, cheating death, right? Rinse and repeat. I think that's a pretty fair description for death in the game of Dungeons and Dragons. Cheating death is integral to the game. Let's face it. Let's talk about what's here. To me, there's three different subjects here, or that are related. One is how death is supposed to be done in the game, the way it's described in the rule books. The other is modifying that moderately. And last is modifying that heavily. And the way I look at this is that there's no wrong answers. Okay? First and foremost, what I think is most important about this is that the way that death is handled in the game is too absolute. And it becomes one of the fastest things that gets changed in home rules for D&D. It's plain and simple. If you play this by the way that the rules are written in the game, it would be highly unlikely for your characters to survive for very many levels. You don't have enough hit points, and yet the game counts on you to be interacting with bad guys and traps and monsters and so forth that are all, well, frankly, trying to kill you. So one of the most common things that happens in the game is you die. Now, if you go back to the very earliest days of the game, when certainly when I was first playing and so forth, and we're talking about the game had literally just come out, people died a lot very quickly. You learned a lot about what types of characters could survive longer, but death was just around the corner all the time. And for certain types of characters, it wasn't just around the corner, it was a half foot in front of you if you were something like a magic user or whatnot. So it's not very fun if you're a player, if you die all the time. And it's not very fun as a DM if your players get frustrated because they're dying all the time. Now, it's easy enough to say, well, play better. Okay, but that's not the answer. The answer is to make it fun for everybody. Well, how do you make it fun for everybody? Well, one of the things is don't destroy the work that your players put into building a character. Okay, nobody as a person. Okay, you don't want to do that. These are people you're having a good time playing with. If you're the DM, you don't really want to rain on their parade. You certainly want them to learn their lesson, but you don't want to kill them every other step. So in the earliest of days, yes, okay, you get to 0 hit points, you're dead. If you're able to have somebody who can do the proper types of healing and cure light or serious or critical or whatever it may be, you can still be alive. If you have a high enough level character in your party, you might be able to be raised from the dead, or resurrected, or reincarnated. They're all options, but they're higher level options. It's not something you can do at a lower level in the game. So trying to make it past that first 5 to 7 levels to get to where you need to be to have people be able to resurrect you and things like that is challenging right there. So what did people do? Well, they started changing things. It was too easy for people to die. It was too easy for characters that had or really promising backstory, we're cool characters, and something stupid happens, and suddenly they're dead. Everybody modified what they were doing. They found ways to allow their characters, the characters in the party, to come back. Right? I did it. I know everybody I've ever spoken to as a DM, well, one exception, happens to be the founder of the game, but that's a whole different thing. He was very adamant about following the rules dogmatically, which is frustrating and not realistic, I think, for most people. You lose a lot of interest from players if you're constantly having to restart as a player, and you really can't take on anything that's stronger than, like a rat or an orc or something like that, because you never grow fast enough and you die. So, like I said, everybody started modifying that part. If you play by the exact rules without any deviation, you're going to end up with a player group who is very, very frustrated with you and very frustrated with the game. That's the truth. So people started circumventing that one way or another. They either started the players at a higher level so that they had more hit points and more opportunities to receive healing before they bit the big one. Or you made changes in the game. Like I did, I allow God calls. You're dying. You make a last moment call. Small percentage chance, but you make a last moment call to the gods. And maybe they'll intercede on your behalf. So we start doing things as DMs to make it easier for our players to survive. And it depends on how you want to look at it. Is this good? Is this bad? Should they always die? Should they always live? At the end of the day, that's a discussion between you and your group and the DM. If you're happy with what's going on, then do what you do. Do what makes sense and is enjoyable to you and the group. Have I run into some extreme measures of this? Yeah, I have. People who've had characters for a very, very, very long time, and they don't die. They may die temporarily, but not long term. When I was first involved with the game, well, actually, probably about 5 years after the game, this would have been late 1970s, at the UW Parkside for Gen Con. I think it was late 1970s. I don't know, I'm old. So there were a lot of groups playing off in the side corridors, and they weren't part of the official, scheduled events and all this kind of stuff. And I was wandering around with some of my friends, and we were watching what was going on. And we found an awful lot of players that were in an age group that we didn't think would be interested in D&D. They were like from maybe 10 to 14 years old. And as adults, we watched them, and one of the things we noticed is that virtually every one of these groups, the players were super high level. They were, at a time when higher levels were just being introduced through the books. We had people that were, 30th level, this kind of stuff, and this kind of stuff. They were super, super powerful. Well, at the time, we certainly thought that was pretty ridiculous. And we referred to these dungeons where everybody was carrying around massive amounts of super valuable magic items and wealth and so forth. Within the greater D&D community, they were referred to as Monty Hall dungeons. And they were quite a bit different than what everybody else had been playing. Did that make it wrong? No, didn't make it wrong. Did I particularly care for it or agree with what they were doing? No, I didn't. But it's okay. The game is very flexible. It's what you agree to do with your players. If everybody's on board for doing it, it doesn't matter. So really, what's the fail here? The fail here is that the death in the game was made too absolute and too easy to occur. Now you can do something like some of the things I've described. I have another friend who's a DM, and he gives each of his players, they're like cats, they get 9 lives. 9 resurrections or reincarnations or whatever. But after 9, that's it. They're done, gone permanently. You can do things like I have as well for players that have been killed, is allowing them to come back as either NPCs or to come back in dungeons that would have been outside the timeline where they perished. There are always options for bringing back characters, even if they've died. But really, it doesn't matter if you bring back people occasionally and then eventually kill them, or you allow them always to come back and allow the player's investment in that character in terms of time and development and so forth to carry on, which I can understand, certainly. As a DM, I take joy from my players who develop really cool characters over time that are legendary in one form or another and go through all kinds of interesting deeds. I mean, you could write a book about some of these, there's no question about it. I think that's very cool. But is that the way it should be? Doesn't matter. This is Dungeons and Dragons. The impossible is always possible. Now, that doesn't mean it'll happen in my dungeons, and it may mean that the things I do are not going to happen in someone else's dungeon. I'm less inclined to allow people to live forever. Having said that, I have been a facilitator in helping people live forever. Really depends on how you judge your group as a DM and how you want to work with them. And it's up to your group to tell you, well, that's okay or that's not okay. I can live with that. I can't live with that. It's part of the social contract you have whenever you play the game. And no 2 sets of rules are ever the same. You go from one table to another. It doesn't matter who the DMs are. There's always going to be individual quirks that are tied to the interpretation that that DM has for the game and how they want to employ the rules. It's totally cool. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. So like I said, today we're talking about death, which is a difficult subject within D&D. There's a very famous saying out there that says, death is lighter than a feather and duty is heavier than a mountain. That's a old quote that was from the Imperial Japanese military, going way back. And in D&D, I'd actually argue it's the opposite. Death is heavier than a mountain. Duty is lighter than a feather. Because as an individual, you feel the death. If that's my character, I feel the death. When I'm out there doing all my stuff, I'm doing all my stuff. That doesn't hurt me at all. It is the duty that's lighter than a feather. It's the death that really busts me up as a character and as a player. Good DMs recognize that and work with your players to at least make the death valued, I guess, if they do have to die. They die in some spectacular fashion. So once again, that's my fail tale today. I think that the real fail is that there wasn't enough cheating of death in the original game. There should have been more rinse and repeat. The average that's out there today when you talk to DMs is somewhere between the extremes that I talk about today. So, I don't know. What do you think? Think different? Leave me a comment. Keep it within the community guidelines. Other than that, I hope you found this thought-provoking, interesting, all that kind of good stuff. If you did, please be so kind as to leave us a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't. By all means, come back and see us again real soon. And remember, dwarves rock!